Feature video out now, man. Like, comment, subscribe.
Gonna be together, know what I'm saying?
engine back out of the car. My brother, I haven't even talked to him about it.
Hold the fuck up. What?
So I stored the parts inside the TT. Now I have a little extra space to maneuver around in my assembly room to start prepping for the cylinder head on the bench and to see what do we need as far as fitment, or if we have to make any special modifications to fit in these performance cams. I'm back on this workbench where I first assembled the cylinder head, and I'm about to make some changes. So I'm getting ready to swap out the new with some newer. Okay, these camshafts are okay, and in my opinion, they're probably better for normally aspirated, but I have some custom camshafts that will be great for forced induction, and we'll find out. All of us will. And if I'm correct, these cams that I have should outperform my original ones that I had installed in here tremendously. I mean, 5 to 10 fold. A lot better, a lot consistent with tuning. So one of the things that I'm concerned with though is these new cams got some pretty good lift. Now on the 3.2 liters, some modifications may have to be made on those cylinder heads. The 3.6, I'm not quite sure, but we'll find out. It appears that I've got some good distance down in here before I get too close to the valve stem seal. So hopefully, even though this cams have increased lift, hopefully we still have great clearance from our valve stem seals. As I'm removing the cam caps, a few of my studs came out due to the fact that I used Loctite on the studs, and the reasoning for that is I lost the engine because I've had one of these nuts come loose on my race car, and the nut came loose, got stuck in between the chain drive and actually locked it up and just destroyed the engine, all because of high revving and vibration in one of these coming back out. So I made it a point after that crazy, and I want to say tragic loss over one of these little freaking nuts. I've been Loctiting them ever since. So to each his own, but that's what I've been doing. And since then, I haven't had any more problem. But what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to clean up all the hardware that I took out. I'll put Loctite back in on the threads on the original hole that the stud threads down into, and that way the studs will be fixed back into position. So when I go to take the nuts off, in most cases, the stud will stay in and just the nut will come off. I cleaned all the hardware in the ultrasonic cleaner and reinstalled all the cam cap studs using red Loctite to seat them in place. So I'm gonna give that a chance to set overnight and give that a chance to cure. I also used the air gun, blew off any debris off of any of the nuts as well as the cam caps, just to make sure any previous Loctite debris doesn't come off and just settle down in the head. Trying to make sure all the parts and hardware is pretty much clean before I put everything back into position and start testing for fitment of the camshaft. Came across some good information as well as a good idea hit me, and I've installed valve guides before many a times. I've got the tools to knock them out, reinstall them and everything. But one of the good things that I like is we have some options to make some corrections. So the valve guides, as you can see, they're sticking up quite a bit. All right. So each one of these valve guides can be knocked down shorter, but to save the time and effort, what I would do is order some new valve guides that's even shorter. This is my cylinder head, as you can see, my name's on it, and of course Teddy's head is right here. So what I will do, if time is prevailing, I will order some shorter valve guides, Teddy also has a backup spare head also. Knock all the valve guides out install the new valve guides and take them down a little further, and that way we do not ever have to worry about any problem with the top of the valve stem hitting the bottom of the keepers or anything like that, or the bottom of the keepers hitting the top of the valve stems and causing damage and creating oil leaks. So that is something that I will do, whether it's in the future or definitely with my head before I do the installation. But I will definitely, as I stated, install shorter valve guides and position everything down a lot lower, closer towards the base of the cylinder head, so that way my valve guides can be pretty much right above that step and have my valve seal, when I position them, it'd be closer to that step right there. So that is a plan that's in the work, and that will allow for the higher lift camshafts without having to worry about possibly, as long as you have pretty good stiff springs, having to worry about creating valve seal damage because they're being pounded by the top of the keepers and the retainers. So that's the plan. I'll order the parts and we'll just keep moving forward to see what we can get. But also, either way, I have a backup plan also. I have another set, 3 more sets of custom camshafts to my own specification coming, and they have identical lift as the camshafts that I took out, which should not be a problem with this type of cylinder head, because that lift that the original cams, new cams that was in here, cat cams, those camshafts, the lift in those, oh, I'm sorry, I am tired. The lift that's in those camshafts are identical, and they've been run quite a bit in other VR6 engines, and we should not really have to worry about having a problem with those. So that is a backup plan that I did take into consideration when I custom set up all the specs for those cams that I have coming also. I have a few VR6 heads out that I'm doing some experiment with. I got Teddy's head on the bench, my head sitting on the stool, and I have an experimental head that I've removed some valves from before to replace cylinder heads that had some bent valves. In fact, when we had purchased Teddy's head from the salvage yard, a few of the valves were slightly bent, and I removed the valves from this cylinder head in order to replace those. So this is what I want to do. If you see how far that valve stem is sticking up pretty high, and my issue is when we run high lift camshafts, we pose the risk of making contact with the top of that valve stem seal, which will create an oil leak and smoke, of course, screwing up tuning and everything. So I have the tools right here in the seat. I want to do a quick test of my air compressors over here and see if I can reposition the valve guides. Now, I made some purchases today, and I want to get these items that I purchased out ASAP, and I mean as soon as possible. So estimated time should be here Thursday or Friday, which would be good. Then I can pick back up on Teddy's head and revamp it. So my experimental item is, we got these racing high lift cams, and we don't want to make contact with that valve stem seal. So I have a tool. I ordered new valve guides as well as new valve stem seals, and the guides that I ordered is a little bit shorter, so that way that valve guide does not have to stick up so far through inside the cylinder head, meaning if I shift them down a lot lower, then I will have a lot more valve clearance. Easy 10 millimeter. I mean, I could shove that valve guide down a lot further, but my thing is I like to move it a good 5 to 10 millimeter lower, and that would give us some excellent clearance from our valve, from the springs or keepers making contact with them. Some other people have made modifications such as cutting the valve stem seal itself to position it lower, and I definitely do not want to go that route, but to each his own. So my route, I want to modify the valve guides, and that is a good performance way of doing that. Modifying the valve guides, either shortening them up so we have the proper clearance and trimming it off Of course, shooting them up and installing them. But as a test, I want to see if we can punch these through just a little bit, and we can save those valve guides for a rebuild and cylinder heads that may need them. Back at it, we're in an assembly room, and the game plan for today is to start disassembling the VR6 cylinder head. This is Teddy's head on the bench. We have some nice custom ground camshafts, and the camshafts are pretty spicy. So with this particular camshaft that we have, I'm going to have to perform some modifications to the cylinder head. So what I'm going to have to do is remove pretty much all the nice juicy parts that I use to put this head back together. SuperTech, valve springs, and valve train, all of this is going to have to come out. Make some modifications, put all new valve stem seals and everything back in, and then keep rolling with the program. So let's get this head taken apart. All of the valve guides have been removed. I have new valve guides that just came in. We're going to continue to modify the new valve guides and do a reinstallation for everything. I'm making some good progress in the process of installing the new valve guides. They've been modified to my specifications, and in the process of using a little retaining compound to hold them in position. This is a high temperature retaining compound, and this works fairly good with reinstalling valve guides and things like that. Let's get these in here and get this head put back together. We are all back together. Intake and exhaust valves are all in position. It was a little time consuming and tedious because honing each valve guide out to make sure no binding and each one of the valves can slide in and out without any issues. So it turned out pretty good. We'll have this bad boy back together. So now let's rotate it over, put it up on the stands, and start prepping to install the valve stem seals. Usually before I flip the head over, I'll put masking tape on the back of the surface so that none of my valves drop out, because you do not want to get any of your valves mixed up. I do have my original markings on the valves, so I'll still know which port that they go into, but you do not want to get them mixed up if they drop out or potentially fall out while you're flipping the head over and make a mistake and damage or bend a valve. That would not be good. But this go around, we're going to do something different. Okay, we're using, of course, the SuperTech valve stem seals, but before we had the polyacrylic on the intake and the Viton on the exhaust. Now, the Viton seals are very durable, and they can handle a lot of the fuels that we're using. They can handle alcohol, all the different high octane racing fuels that are going to be used. So therefore, it'll be better for us to use the Viton on the intake as well as the exhaust. While that fuel is spraying, because we're using port fuel injection as well as direct injection, but the ports are going to be filled with a lot of fuel. That fuel, of course, will saturate onto the valve as well as the valve stem, and that can prematurely wear down some seals under consistent use that may not be durable enough for running high octane fuels. So that's what we're going to use this time around. Viton on intake as well as exhaust. Check out these huge dowel pins or cylinder head dowels. That's a secret. Don't tell anybody, but check these bad boys out. So just as we had the 1/2-inch ARP bolts to keep the head rigid and secure in place, we have some heavy duty cylinder head dowels keeping this head fixed to keep it from shifting around. Just installed all the Viton intake and exhaust valve stem seals. I have one last one to go, and this is the tool that I usually use for my valve cell installation. This makes things extremely easier. This kit came with 5mm up to 8mm tips for installing your valve stem seals, and also it came in addition with a 3/8 for those that have 3/8-inch valve stems. This tool comes in handy because this sits down nice and neat. I actually beveled the tip of this just so that it can make it easier to slide on the valve stem, the valve seal, without making or causing any type of damage to the valve seal itself. And you just matter of sticking it, insert it into the guide, and then get a rubber mallet. I usually hold it with one hand, but just for video purposes, tap it down lightly. And then as soon as you hear that metal thump, right there, you know you made contact and your valve seal is totally bottomed out. Because this was resting, the valve seal itself was resting, has a metal base, and it's resting on the lip. You don't have to worry about damaging your valve seals while installing. So we're done that stage. I can reinstall the valves and keep it moving. As we progress, there's a lot of extra improvement that can be made to the combustion chamber in a lot of these areas, like in corners where it can be taken, extra material can be taken out around here just to help promote better airflow from around the intake valves in these corners right here. The exhaust valves are fairly good, as you can see right here. So it gives enough airflow to kind of flow around the exhaust valve, but the intake is pretty tight in each one of these corners. But small little modifications like that will help promote airflow. So that is on future cylinder heads to come. We now have our valve seats, springs, and retainers into position. Next step is to install our valve keepers. That part can be very time consuming if you've done this before. And let's get it done. Once we have that back, we'll be all the way revamped back and ready for our high performance camshafts. Okay, my surgery is done for the night. Just got finished operating on this bad boy and it is back together. We have our valve springs, retainers, keepers all installed. Everything has been double checked and tested to make sure all is secure. So we are looking good. Now we're back to our original stage where the head was, but yet in a better state. So now all we have to do is prep, go ahead and put our big boy camshafts in here and wait for the rotating assembly to come from the machine shop, and then we'll start putting together that block. But for the meantime, I'm still working on some nice trick parts for this bad boy. This is the way this should have been put together in the beginning. In the interim, we came across all sorts of other good information, stuff that would make this thing better. But the primary part that we needed to change was that crankshaft. While that was in the process of being swapped out, it's like other modifications that I know will take this to the next level. So we'll get a chance to see the max potential out of this stage one with an off the shelf Eagle rod and see what this thing can make. Now the rods were spec'd out for and rated for the 6-cylinder for around 13 to 1500 horsepower. We'll see if we can push that level and maybe exceed it just a little bit. But let's rock and roll. She's back, ready for the cams.